All right, good afternoon, and I'd like to bring the regular afternoon meeting of Township Council to order. And welcome back after summer holidays. I hope you all have your essays ready on what I did in my summer holiday.
My dog ate mine.
Oh, okay, well there we go. This is the first excuse. Mine's at the printers. So the first thing is the adoption and receipt of the agenda items for this meeting. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Ferguson, second by Councillor Kunst. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next item is adoption of the minutes of the regular afternoon council meeting of July 22nd. I have a motion, please. Councillor Arneson, second. Councillor Kunst, any errors or omissions? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And need a motion to resolve into special close for the items on the agenda and on table. And so a motion for that, please. Councillor Ferguson, second by Councillor Long. And Mr. Backen had a personnel item he wanted added, so we'll add that. Anything else? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We now move into closed.
community and what it should look like and the type of amenities in addition to the gaming facility that would, in addition to the gaming equipment that would be in there. Our vision at this moment is that it would be a very modest facility. It would likely have no tables. We would likely recommend or propose a facility somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 pieces of electronic equipment. That would be both slot machines as well as electronic tables. That would be a smallish facility in the ecosystem of BCLC. We do, however, believe that there's a market in that area for a small boutique-style facility with a superior food and beverage attachment to it. The reason why food and beverage is so important is because over the past while we've come to know our customers very, very well. And what we've come to realize, what we've come to know, is that most, if not many, if not most of our customers demand a multifaceted facility when they come to a gaming facility in British Columbia. What they demand is that they have a great food and beverage offering, perhaps a little bit of light entertainment, as well as the gambling equipment, the ability to gamble within that facility. We know that without a great amenity package attached to the gambling component of the facility, it's just not that successful, and sometimes it'll fail. So the facility that we envision at this moment, we're in very, very preliminary stages of determining the commercial viability, would be, as I mentioned, a boutique facility, smallish, a small facility, probably no more than 200 slots, no table games, but with an excellent food and beverage attached. I'll pause there. And if there's any questions, if not, I'd like my colleague Greg to come up and talk a little bit about the player health aspect of any facility that we establish.
I don't see any questions. I have a question. Just to give us a bit of background, the facility that was over on 64th Avenue, how many slots? It had slots in it, and it was also bingo hall. How many slots did it have at the time that it was basically deactivated, or when it started to reduce?
Yeah, I'm afraid I don't have that with me.
Okay, just curious to have a...
50, my colleague tells
50?
me.
Okay, so this is a little bit bigger than that. Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, I got Councillor Whitmarsh, a question for you.
Yes, thank you. Just to help me a little bit understand, when you talk about a boutique, modest facility, what kind of sort of footprint or square footage or that sort of thing would it take? I don't know. I don't have a sense of that.
I'm not sure I'm qualified to give you the exact square footage. It really depends on the design. What we ask the service provider to do when they submit design proposals to us is to make sure that the facility is very bright, is modern, has lots of natural light coming into it. The old style of, I think, which was the case of the old Playtime facility, was a dark, closed, square-like, box-like facility. This would not be that, and we would not approve something like that. But in terms of the actual square footage, I'm not sure I can give you that answer. It would be, we always encourage our service providers to build for the future, and we would project some form of growth as we move down. Obviously, all of this is subject to council and township approval. We know that folks who come to our facilities value an aesthetic, beautiful facility, and that often expands the footprint. It expands the footprint out of proportion to the amount of gaming equipment on site.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, do you call these facilities, are they called casinos? They have a different name?
That's a great question. The Gaming Control Act, as it stands now, has really two types of facilities. Three really, but there's racetracks that are also casinos, like you see in Surrey. There's community gaming centers and casinos. So a community gaming center is what we're talking about here. We would have to make a determination in consultation with, of course, council and Gateway whether we would include bingo or not. But a community gaming center is a smaller facility, essentially electronic equipment only, without live dealers like live tables. Having said that, that's a legal definition. What we found over the years is that whether we call it a community gaming center as a trade name, or whether we call it a casino, everybody calls it a casino. So we allow the service providers to call it a casino, but in the strict definition of the Gaming Control Act, it is a community gaming center.
Right. Okay. So my last question, you talked about food and beverage. Does that mean it has the sort of banquet type facilities, or it just has food and beverage available to those that are playing the games?
It would be both. Gateway is the holder of the Gateway Entertainment is the holder of the of this particular operating service agreement. They have a great amenity package. What they would envision going into this facility, and I don't want to speak on their behalf, but they have a trademarked facility called Match, and it's done quite well. It's a family-friendly, meaning that it has a door to the outside where people don't have to, obviously, where people under the age of 19 don't cross the gaming floor because they're not allowed on the gaming floor. What we find is that different types of players like different types of amenities. The type of player that we see in this particular area is a light and casual player who will come for an all-encompassing evening. So yes, they would gamble a little bit, but often most of them come because of the amenity, because of the food and beverage, usually with a bit of light entertainment, so a small stage that's capable of a small live band or something like that. So that's what we would be envisioning for this. There would likely be like a grab-and-go facility. Again, I don't want to commit on behalf of Gateway, but usually they have a small grab-and-go facility for those who just want that kind. But the vast majority of our players want a better sit-down, sort of socially interactive amenity, and that's what we would require Gateway to put in.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Woodward?
Can you just expand on, before I get started, before I forget, grab and go? What's
that would be either like a sort of a cafeteria style, or pre-made food, or in some cases a buffet, something like that.
Buffet, okay. I was just curious, who drives the process for an additional location, be it a casino or a gaming center? Would that be you or the provider?
It's driven by us. Sometimes the service provider comes to us and says that they've identified a need, but the statutory approver is us. In this particular case, we looked at all the areas in North Langley, and we are in the Langley area and the township, and we felt that that area around 200th and the freeway would probably be, obviously subject to your approval, would probably be the best fit for a facility like this.
And so what if we were to give you feedback that we would want a boutique casino rather than a boutique community gaming center?
That you would want with live tables? We would go back and do a market survey to determine whether that was commercially viable or not, and then give you that feedback.
And it wouldn't be relevant to you where all the residents live, for example. So if we have all the residents and someone else has the casino, that wouldn't be part of your calculations. It
would be the catchment area that would likely that the facility would likely draw from. So that may be across municipal boundaries. And
so for live tables, you would draw a wider. Just trying to understand your process for permitting a larger facility. You would draw a larger circle, which might include a facility that already exists.
In some cases, it would bump up against another facility that exists, but our business model is that we do everything in our power to ensure that there is no competition between service providers. We think that's counterproductive to the offering that the service providers have, and it's also it would be a challenge for us in terms of funding, because we would be spending capital dollars on a development where we would also have capital dollars invested in another facility, which would be competing against the two. And for us, financially, viable.
I can see how that's not viable for you guys. I had one last question in regards to, you mentioned, I just want to make sure I got this correctly. You mentioned something regarding the food area, full casino facility versus you would have a nice, I wrote down nice restaurant, but I think you meant something more than that, right? When you said you were going to use food as a draw and then you would have the tables versus not the tables, the electronic devices, make sure I get the terminology right, would be the draw for the food, or the food would be the draw for the electronic devices. I'm trying to understand that a little bit more.
Right. So really it depends. We have a number of player segmentations that different types of players that come to our facilities. The vast majority come for that, are drawn to a facility because they want to gamble, but they also want to have a really nice night out. And so in terms of food and entertainment. So we find that without that really good food and beverage amenity, the gambling just doesn't work.
So
because there are some players who see gambling alone as a form of entertainment that they really enjoy, but they are in a minority. The vast majority of our players like the full package, and so what we try to do is provide, or we incent the service providers to provide that.
So I'll follow up on that then. So how would a boutique facility with fewer offerings, with good food amenities, be competitive with a full casino that has those offerings plus pretty good food amenities with the expansions we've seen at the Cascades Casino recently in regards to their food options? How would another facility in North Langley with less to offer be competitive?
Well, I don't see it as less to offer. I think what we're talking about here is a different experience and a variety, and our players like different experiences. We may see some movement back and forth between Cascades in the city and any facility up here. But we would be looking for an entirely different experience in this particular facility than they would, say, at Cascades. A lot of players don't like the hustle and bustle and the noise levels and that of a large facility. They like the more intimate community sort of niche facility. Good examples of that are, actually a great example of that is Kamloops. We have two facilities in the same community. The Cascades facility up the hill is a full-on casino. It's got multiple food and beverage offerings, whereas the Chances facility, they call themselves a casino as well, down the hill on the north shore of Kamloops, they're an entirely different offering. There's a smaller facility, they do have bingo, and they have a single really good food offering. And there is a completely separate set of customers that go to each one of those, and both of them are doing well. So it really is about the experience. It's not, one size doesn't fit all. What we try to do is provide a variety of experience, but still paying attention to that reasonable catchment area for each facility. Did I answer your question?
I think it does. Yeah, it's just, of course, my fellow council colleagues know my frustrations and where I'm going with that, but I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Kunst?
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I had a question. I think you kind of answered that, and it was in regards to how this would impact the Cascades in the city of Langley. So,
yeah, we don't expect that there would be negligible, if any, facility. Quite frankly, if we thought there was going to be major impact, we wouldn't be proposing that. We wouldn't be in the preliminary stages of proposing a facility where we're suggesting it should go.
And do you have a timeline as far as what you could see?
No, we are likely a year or two out. Of course, it depends on our approvals. More importantly, it depends on your approvals. It depends on commercial viability. My purpose here today is to give you some insight on our thought and the direction we're going, and if the township has some feedback on that, we would really appreciate that.
And how many community gaming centers are there in BC?
Is that 18? Yeah, we have 35 facilities in total. There's 18 CGCs and 17 casinos, if I remember correctly. And
are they fairly well received in most communities that you...
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Councillor Arneson?
Yes, thank you very much for coming. It's a very interesting topic. And I just had a couple of quick questions. My first one has to do with your market research, because I know you must do a lot of that. So I wondered if there, in your experience, has been any new co-location models to talk about what kind of pairings we could have between what you're suggesting and other kind of, I'm going to consider it to be like an entertainment hub kind of situation.
That's actually a great question because we've done a lot of work around that. And we know that certain types of entertainment, certain types of other facilities pair well with gambling facilities. So, for instance, in certain locations where it makes sense, a hotel situated adjacent or in connection with a gambling facility does well. We know that, as I mentioned, I've said a number of times, a variety of food and beverage does well. Meeting space where there's sort of moderate to larger meeting spaces paired with a facility does well. Not only drives visitation to the non-gambling amenity, but it also drives visitation to the gambling site as well. So gone are the days, especially in this province. We have a much different model than elsewhere, even elsewhere in Canada. Gone are the days where you simply build a square box, put a bunch of slot machines in, and hope that it's going to do a good job, because it won't. The difference between the BC model and models you'll see elsewhere is we are very deliberate where we put these facilities. We do a lot of research before we propose a location, always open to change that, of course. In other jurisdictions like Ontario and Quebec, they've gone to more of a mega casino facility. And I'm not suggesting one is worse or better than the other, but with a mega casino, you have one large facility which tends to be a destination style casino where lots of folks come, they spend a period of time, and then leave. This province, and long before I came on the scene, made the right choice, in my view, that we would have a more distributed model. About 90% of British Columbians live within a 30-minute drive of a casino right now, and that includes in the north. So the notion of this community feel, whether it's a community gaming center or casino, is really, really important to the success, and quite frankly, is a major component in how we manage player health.
And just one final comment, and you'll have to excuse my lack of real reference to gambling because I don't frequent casinos generally. But I do know that it's international, and so people go for a number of reasons. I'm wondering if there is any research that's been done on the cultural aspects or demographics and things like that that can give insights as to what would really be successful in a community.
That's one of the marketing. That's part of the marketing review that we do. We look at the demographics of the community, income levels, access, and so on, to determine what type of facility would be best suited. And we have a high degree of flexibility when that comes as well, because demographics change in in communities all the time. So we're able to change our equipment to best suit what that particular community wants and needs, and finds it the most entertaining. So that is definitely a part of the process that we go through. It is exhaustive because even with a modest number of slot machines, that represents a significant capital investment by the corporation.
Councillor Long?
Well, thank you. I was going to ask a question that should have come from this side of the table. What kind of revenue would you expect from a 200-slot facility like this? So
we believe that that this facility, and there's always factors, and this is preliminary, we believe that the top line, that the net revenue would be, so when I say net revenue, I mean revenue after prizes have been paid out, would be somewhere in the neighborhood of $10 or $12 million. What does
the host municipality get
10%.
Oh, yeah.
There's some calculations that go into that. The province actually does the calculation, and they have some other factors they employ. But generally speaking, it's 10%.
Good, thanks.
Councillor Ferguson?
Oh, yeah, thank you. I was hoping that Mr. Walker would be here to answer these questions. I've known Mr. Walker for years, and I was just trying to think of a time where we agreed. I think we agreed that I guess one of the things I would say we agreed on is the fact that, a number of years ago when I was 5 years old, I said to my mom and dad who quit smoking, I said, man, if everybody quit smoking, Mom and Dad, then we'd eliminate some cancers and heart disease and other things. But, look at us today. I mean, with all the information, things, people are still smoking. I've always wondered over the years, I've said to Mr. Walker and others, and I know that you're not here to discuss that, if there's ever been an opportunity to actually look at the casino model and that model that you put together. Number one, locations, how many you put together and why it's done that way. Mm-hmm. And I know you guys are here to represent, you don't represent any changes. You guys don't have the ability to change things. It has to be in Victoria or somebody higher up the ladder. I mean, you guys are here. You can't change. You can't put 2 locations in Langley Township, or you can't put two more in Abbotsford, and you can't put a McDonald's or Starbucks model or something like that. You guys are kind of caught.
I can actually make the decision. I am the decision maker when it comes to what facility goes where and how many.
So right now, I say, could you put a bigger facility in Walnut Grove, the same size as the one in the city?
If it was commercially viable, we could.
How do you know if it's commercially viable or not? Maybe all those folks from the city might go to the township or something. Like if we put a bigger restaurant, sometimes that happens.
Right. So the challenge we have is to make sure that the service providers who make the investment in the original facility, that their investment creates a return. We also, as I mentioned earlier, we look for opportunities to provide different experiences, and also what as I mentioned before, the commercial viability. And we spend a lot of time looking at that data, both the economic data, the socioeconomic data, the demographics of the community, and we make a decision based on that. That doesn't mean that it's not scalable. It doesn't mean that at all. It means that if we find that the facility has not been scaled large enough, then we can scale it up. We encourage the service providers to build to future needs. But by the same token, there have been times where we have thought that a facility, that we've placed equipment in a facility that was too much, and we've pulled equipment out and moved it somewhere else. So it's ongoing. The process is ongoing on determining what the right mix is and what the right size is. You could be absolutely right. We could build a facility here. It could just take off, and we would then look at scaling up.
It's interesting because I understand that Delta community that sat in the sidelines for a while. I think they've got one up and running right now, and.
No, they're barely into the construction. But
yes. The construction is up and running, yeah. And the first opposition to that was the city of Richmond, because they don't want to give away their casino money. But anyway,
and they won't.
Since you are a big decision maker, we're surrounded in a region here. We share water and sewer and things like that. Question: it's not just my idea. It's come up with former chair of the regional district, Moore,
our new CEO. Yes.
Yeah. Basically, former CEO. And basically, we talked about a sharing formula which would be more equitable. You've got a casino right next door. Richmond, Burnaby, Coquitlam, and of course to a lesser degree Langley City. Some of them are in the hundreds of millions of dollars they've got. We don't have. We're a taxpayer. We have to have police, fire. They have that extra revenue. If you ask everybody in the region where the casino money goes, I've knocked on your neighbor's door, other than maybe he's educated, they probably wouldn't know. People just don't know where, and people have to lose money, of course. It's very sad, but I've never placed a bet in the Cascades Casino. Just you can quote me on that, Mr. Walker. But the thing is, that doesn't mean to say I haven't been there. I haven't attended events. I was disappointed they shut down the theater. Maybe they're going to build a bigger one with casino money. But the thing is, we were looking for equity. That's when fairness. If somebody in Langley Township, and Mayor Moore and myself at the time said somebody lived in Port Coquitlam, went and gambled in there, or somebody, we say, well, why not some fairness? We don't take it from their own city, but why not some fairness? The model, it's an old model now. You know, they changed ICBC, they changed the medical services, they changed, the list goes on. They can change rules for real estate agent, the list goes on. Surely to goodness can you folks make some changes as far as equity in that particular operation?
So I should probably delineate my role as a decision maker and the province's role. My role is to amongst other things is to be the final decision maker on where and what where a facility goes. That revenue is generated, and that at the end of the year, that net income is turned over to the government. The government, our shareholders, responsible for partitioning those funds out. But you've made a couple of good points. But the one point that is within our control is talking about where the gaming revenue goes and where the gaming grants go. And I think we haven't done a good enough job of that, because I know there are some recipients in your community that aren't dependent on that 10%, the host local government grant that comes from the provincial government, but the actual gaming grants, which are also adjudicated by the provincial government, I think we probably need to do a way better job of saying where that goes.
That was another thing that Mayor Moore and myself researched as well.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you guys coming, and keep doing what you're going to do. I love your socks there. In fact, if you want, you can not print socks next year, not print any swag, and give all that extra money to us, okay?
Okay, we do have to move along. I've got Councillor Richter, and then maybe Councillor Woodward can hold their question until we've heard from Mr. Walker. And then Councillor Richter.
Yes, I just wanted to go back to your population estimates and so on. Langley Township has 125,000 people. Langley City only has 25,000 people. In the location that you're looking at, the 200th Street and the freeway, there's 25,000 people to the north of the freeway, and there's 80,000 or will be 80,000 to the south of the freeway. Why wouldn't you put a bigger casino here?
Right now, we believe that a sizable portion of those folks may not be gamblers. The market survey that we've done suggests that they are attending other facilities elsewhere. Not just in the city of Langley, and as well as in the city of Surrey. They're looking for different gambling experiences. At this moment, based on our review, we think that the commercial viability in this area is modest. We don't think that we would be doing anyone a service, whether it be the municipality or the citizens here, by overbuilding and then finding that it wasn't viable. It's easier to scale up than scale back, and so that would be our preferred approach. But again, the township holds most of the cards here, and you'll be the folks that approve or not approve this facility in the form that is proposed by us and the service provider.
When's that going to be coming forward to us?
I would expect it would be a year or two.
In a year or two, okay. Because when you pulled the slots out of township, we were using that money to fund the homeless shelter, and now property tax dollars are being used to fund the homeless shelter. So it would be nice to get that revenue back again, because we have good use for it. Okay, great.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we'll hear from Mr. Walker. Thank you for answering those questions. And just to remind Council, this is just really a brief introduction to what's coming down. There's lots of decision points along the way, and we are running out of time. So, Mr. Walker, you've got the floor.
Your Worship, thank you very much. My name is Greg Walker. I'm the Director of Public Affairs, and I am very conscious of Council's time. So I just wanted to talk about one aspect of this, one of the key strategies for BC Lottery Corporation moving forward. It's called player health. Some of you, particularly Councillor Ferguson and Councillor Long, are aware that BCLC has a commitment to making sure there is, on the casino floor, there is a way for players to be familiar and educated about our program. We call that about the nature of gaming, rather, excuse me. We call that program Game Sense. And there is a GameSense booth on the floor in Cascades, the Cascades facility. What I'm here that's a little bit different for members of council is that because of the success of the GameSense program, we've expanded it. So any new facility that is built will have, on the casino floor, will have a GameSense booth. And in addition to that, it will be staffed with a GameSense advisor. That person is able to provide information about the nature of gambling, is able to give assistance to those who may need it, such as the Problem Gambling Information Line, which is free counseling services in the province of British Columbia. That's the commitment that we have, knowing that some people may be challenged by our product. And what I mean by that is that the province has studied the number of tendency towards problem gambling in the province of British Columbia. We know that that number is 3.3% of adults in British Columbia, and as a result, we have that responsibility. What is different for someone like Councillor Ferguson is that he's aware that we've done GameSense in the past, but what we're doing now is we're making sure that every single facility that gets introduced in this province will not only have that GameSense booth, but it will also be staffed. Very quickly, thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Okay, it's been a good discussion. I want to thank you for coming out and just giving us this introduction. It's been long before I was on council when we had the last discussion regarding a casino in the Township of Langley, and with the what's happened with the one that we already had with the slot machines that have been pulled out, as Councillor Richter has already stated. There is certainly a desire to take another look at it. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we move on to delegations. We have two delegations, Kent Mullenix and Wallapak Pulisub. I hope I got the name correct. Sorry if I messed that up. Welcome here. And unlike a presentation, we do have 5 minutes for you.
Right. We'll be quick. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for allowing us to come before you. Dr. Pulisub and I are here to brief you on a project we have initiated, and fair warning to ask you to contribute funding to its execution. In British Columbia, the ALR is designed to protect farmland and in that process encourage farming of it. One of the capacities of the Agricultural Land Commission is to provide non-farm use exemptions and to allow subdivisions or boundary adjustments of the ALR. When they do that, purportedly they are to enhance the agricultural use of ALR lands or to do no harm to the agricultural capacity of the lands. In the history of the Agricultural Land Commission, there has never been an analysis of the long-term outcomes of non-farm use exemptions on the ALR or boundary adjustments. This represents a very serious information gap and an impediment to our understanding how to administer the agricultural land use regulations at a municipal level and at an ALC level. In the Township of Langley, for example, between 2006 and 2016, there have been 80 non-farm use exemptions or boundary adjustment approvals. And that's affected 93 parcels. For what it's worth, that is more than all the other 5 municipal study areas put together. The question is, have those exemptions and those boundary adjustments affected agriculture positively or negatively? So we have designed and have initiated a study to assess the long-term outcomes of approved non-farm use exemptions and boundary adjustments in Metro Vancouver's Agricultural Land Reserve. And we hope that the information generated will be valuable and inform provincial and municipal policymakers and planners so that they can better protect agricultural land reserve land and facilitate its use for agriculture. So the study municipalities that we have targeted for this project are Delta, Richmond, Surrey, Maple Ridge, Pitt Meadows, and the Township of Langley. Our objective in this study is to identify and tabulate all approved non-farm use exemptions and subdivisions in these 6 municipalities. We will analyze their occurrence, the trends and characterizations by each municipality, and then we intend to conduct on-site assessments to determine whether those non-farm use exemptions and or subdivisions have resulted in a benefit to agriculture or not. We will then summarize our findings and make a report available to each municipality and the province as a whole and the Agricultural Land Commission. Yep. So we are in the process of conducting this study now, and we hope to complete it by December and issue a report shortly thereafter. The total cost for this project is $23,000. The Institute for Sustainable Food Systems is contributing $5,300. We are seeking to secure an additional $18,000. All of that money will go towards staff and mileage simply to conduct the study. And so we are requesting support in terms of $3,000 from each of the 6 target municipalities. To date, Pitt Meadows has agreed to support and fund the project. Maple Ridge also has agreed to fund the project. Richmond has agreed to fund the project, and Delta has agreed to fund the project. We will be hearing from Surrey's council next week. And the Ministry of Agriculture is supportive of this project and is working with us. The Agricultural Land Commission is very supportive of this project and is working closely with us. And Metro Vancouver is also supporting this project and working very closely with us, all because they recognize that this is a serious gap in the knowledge of how ALR policy is being implemented in the Lower Mainland. And so with that, I'll submit our request respectfully of council, and we thank you.
A couple questions here, Councillor Richter.
Yes, I'm just wondering, how come you're approaching the municipalities for funding? Wouldn't the Ministry of Agriculture be the one who should be funding this?
Our relationship is more substantive with municipalities, and exemptions begin at the municipality before they move on to the province. And our thinking was that municipalities would want this information and would likely want to support it.
Well, it's for every tax dollar that's generated in this province, we only get 8 cents.
Yeah, no,
the provincial government gets a lot more, and I think they should be picking up the tab for this, not us.
Well, you'll no argument from me, but we don't have that kind of relationship with the provincial government, and it's difficult to work with them.
Thank you. Councillor Woodward?
I had one question. You focus heavily on boundary adjustments and I think exclusions, or not exclusions, but boundary adjustments. What else was there?
And non-farm use
of course, that's the one I
exemptions.
missed. You mentioned subdivisions once, but then never mentioned it again.
I'm sorry, subdivisions and boundary adjustments are synonymous terms. I apologize, Councilor.
So when someone has an ALR lot, for example, and they subdivide it into 80 residential lots, but then claim the rest of the land is being preserved for farming,
that's
that would
correct.
be included in your study? Because I can think of one of those in Salmon River, for example.
Yes.
So that would be included in your study?
Yes, Councilor.
All right, thank you very
yes.
much.
Councillor Arneson?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Your Worship. I had a couple of questions. It was interesting because after having read what you were going to speaking to us about, but you raised a couple of issues to me that I wondered if you could clarify. So if you're talking about your research is looking at this informational gap, and it's looking at whether or not applications for a subdivision or non-farm use is sort of generically valuable to agriculture. I'm wondering, because that seems just really counterintuitive to me, that could be the case. And so I'm wondering what the logic or the formula or whatever it is that, provides your information on how to characterize that.
Yeah, very good question, Councillor. So by regulation, all non-farm use exemptions cannot have, if they're approved by the ALC, cannot detract from agriculture, and really purportedly are either approved because they enhance agriculture or have no net negative impact. And so for each exemption, there is a rationale put forward by the ALC. This exemption is approved because it will enable this land to be continued to be farmed, or it will facilitate the further production of crops in this area or something like that. Allow this farm family to continue farming. So the question is, does that rationale bear out?
Right. I think that is really a valid question that needs to be delved into, because one of the compelling arguments against subdividing always is that you really are creating more expectation for speculation as you go forward, and that the land is more or less unreachable for many who wish to farm, and they're not able to anymore because of the speculation. So that's another characteristic of what can happen there. I just had a final question about, so you obviously have a research objective. Do you anticipate recommendations arising from your report, or you just were going to focus on a report?
We are going to focus on the data and the analysis of the data.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, Your Worship, thank you. There's limited time, but I think it's a fascinating study area and something that could be of some use, but it may not be of the use that was originally imagined. Just first of all, the criteria, as the doctor is well aware, there's of course exclusions, there's non-farm use, there's subdivision, but there's also lot line adjustments, which are also a form of subdivision. I say that because all those are relevant to the challenges the township faces. I would presume that in some cases there hasn't been a net benefit to the specific agricultural parcel, but would argue there may be benefits to overall agriculture because of a bit of our unique situation. And very, very briefly, when the land freeze came in 1972, the township did not have an official community plan. We didn't develop one until 1979. Most of the other communities, I think all of them, but I can't say for sure about Maple Ridge, had such a plan. So when the reserve came in, the Agricultural Land Reserve Commission actually recognized that and kind of planned around their existing OCPs. Ours came much later with the understanding there would be a revisitation of the plan in 1979 with a review to rationalizing it. Unfortunately, for a whole bunch of reasons, that review was unsuccessful. So we have one of the most complicated, I guess, urban-rural agricultural buffers and boundaries that we can imagine. It truly is a patchwork quilt, with the result that some of the tools you're looking at have been used to try to rationalize that relationship between the urban, the rural, and the agricultural, and it continues to be a challenge even today, insofar as much we actually spent a couple of years trying to develop a memorandum of understanding with the Agricultural Land Commission that we did develop, but we've been unable on both sides to actually use effectively because of this rural-urban interface. So I guess my point really is, can the question that you're asking take that into account, that historical inequity that's existed, and how that could be better rationalized by using some of these tools?
First, I should clarify, and I failed in my haste to say this, we're looking at the last 20-year period here. And the answer is perhaps, but we would have to work with your staff to understand that more.
Thank you.
Yeah. It is complex, and all of the subdivision boundary adjustments are more complex than the non-farm use exemptions. Absolutely.
Thank you. And ultimately, it's the Agricultural Land Commission's decision.
Yep.
We ran into it where we were just making sure that the recommendation follows our bylaws and policies before we send it forward. My feeling has always been it's not up to us to decide the agriculture merits. That's where the Agricultural Land Commission comes in. And there's also non-farm use applications that have been approved. Filming, for example, we've got one farm here. They're busy trying to farm and build their farm, but there's a small portion of it which is used for permanent filming filming, and it's been approved in non-farm use. And that income is helping them move their farm along. So that has to be looked at. Also, non-farm uses are also part of further processing, where the primary production of the crop is an agriculture use, but when you start taking that crop and putting it into a jar and selling it as jam or whatever, that's a non-farm use. So, but that also benefits agriculture in another way, where farmers have a place where they can
Yes,
send their
Mr. Mayor,
products.
and that's exactly what we want to look at.
There's some
What has resulted in net benefit and what kinds of things have not.
Yeah, it's not always just, can we plant potatoes on that piece of land? It's some of the bigger benefits that happen.
Absolutely.
Good. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, the next delegation, Edith Krause, on behalf of Fort Gallery. Welcome here.
Mayor Krause and councillors, I'm really grateful for this opportunity. As I am the president of the board of directors of the Fort Gallery Society, and my colleague Alicia Crichton, also a board member, is she and I are here today to make an appeal for financial assistance from the Township of Langley for the Fort Gallery. I believe you've already received a 2-page report, and I'll just try to summarize what's in that report and then hopefully answer questions. So for 15 years, in the absence of a public arts center in Langley, the Fort Gallery has met our growing community's need for a venue for contemporary art. This is art that is experimental, not necessarily marketable, art that engages the public in conversations around important topics. The Fort Gallery provides a place where diverse members of the community can meet and interact, and it also adds to the appeal of Fort Langley as a visitor's destination. Until recently, the gallery functioned as a co-op, funded primarily through membership fees and collectively run by co-op members. However, the co-op model has always been problematic because of the barriers of the cost of co-op membership and the onerous nature of the volunteer responsibilities. And so these barriers have made it difficult to attract and maintain a sustainably sized group to finance and run the gallery. We've recently restructured the Fort Gallery into an artist-run center. This is a center that is run by artists, but is seen as a public facility. We've dissolved the co-op and replaced it with an open society membership and a general board. So this will be the first artist-run center south of the Fraser, in the Fraser Valley. Instead of artists paying to exhibit their work, solo and collective exhibitions are chosen from submissions, in addition to 2 annual group exhibitions. Each public exhibition includes artist talks and performing arts events, which are free to the public and support local and emerging artists. In addition, we offer art workshops and activities for children and adults of all ages to further engage them in the arts. As an artist-run center, after a probationary period of several years, the gallery will be eligible for sustainable operating funding from the BC Arts Council and the Canada Council for the Arts. Both of these agencies offer project grants to help bridge the gap, but these are matching grants, and the gallery must raise at least half the cost through internal means. It must also demonstrate that it has support at the level of local government before agencies at the provincial and federal level are willing to invest in it. So we have received Township of Langley community grants of up to $2,500 for the last 5 years, and we're very grateful for this. We've also received grants from Metro Vancouver of $2,500 in 2017 and $5,000 this year. Our anticipated annual operating costs for the gallery for 2020 will be in excess of $50,000. So there is a considerable additional fundraising that is required, and this task falls entirely on volunteers. So, in recognition of the valuable service that the Fort Gallery provides our community and to assist in the future survival of the gallery, we respectfully request that the Township of Langley consider matching the grants we receive from Metro Vancouver until such a time that the gallery is able to obtain operating funding from the BC Arts Council and the Canada Council for the Arts. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I do have a question from Councillor Richter. Councillor Richter?
Yeah, I've actually got several questions here. It says here that you must demonstrate support at the local government level. What does this mean? Is it always financial support that has to be kicked in?
When I talked to Sue Donaldson at the BC Arts Council, she was pretty specific. Why should we give you any money if the Langley Township isn't willing to fund you?
Well, I don't understand why we would fund you either. Like,
okay.
We've got a grants program, but...
Yes.
Yeah.
It's insufficient to meet our needs.
Okay. Now, it does say your aim is to become self-sustaining in 2 to 3 years. So would you be expecting this $5,000?
Every year? For 2 to 3 years? I hope we don't need it.
But you would be expecting to get
you know, I'm of the school of what's the worst that can happen? They can only say no. So it would be great if the township would deem us as valuable enough to deserve that. If it's only forthcoming for a year, that's great too. I mean,
and how many artists are involved?
Well, when we were a co-op, there were up to 20 artists, but this is part of the reason why we've expanded to becoming an artist-run center so that it opens it up to everyone. What we found as a co-op was that a lot of young artists simply couldn't afford the fees, and a lot of mid-career artists, people who had full-time jobs, simply couldn't afford the volunteer time. And so it really restricted it. It just created a real barrier for artists, and artists generally are not wealthy people anyways. And so the purpose of the Artist-Run Center then is to actually provide some support for artists. So one of the stipulations of an Artist-Run Center, in order to get the funding from the BC Arts Council and the Canada Council, is that we pay artist fees, and these are stipulated by CARFAC, and I can't remember what that's an acronym for, but it's I think it's in the report that I gave you. But anyways.
Have to now pay the artists.
We do have to pay the artists, so that's an additional cost. That's why our budget has gone up quite a bit. It depends on the size of the gallery, and there are, but the categories are, the lowest category, which we would fall under, is a budget of under 500,000, and our budget is under 50. But anyways, it's $1,700 for an exhibition. So if we have a 2-month exhibition, that's $850 a month, and well, we can all do the math, I guess.
All right, and you say that here your annual operating costs are in excess of $50,000. So what are the key cost drivers in that $50,000?
Rent for the facility, insurance, telephone and internet. We have an office worker who works 10 hours a week, and we pay her a meager $15 an hour, so it works out to about $700 a month. What else? We get refreshments for opening receptions. We pay, when we have musicians in, we pay them an honorarium. We're trying not to take advantage of artists. We're trying to respect them and recognize the valuable contribution that they make to our community.
And the last question I have, this artist-run center, are there other options for structuring that you can consider?
That we can consider? Oh, I have been racking my brain over that for 5 years, and this is the only option that makes us eligible for funding through the BC Arts Council and the Canada Council for the Arts at a sustainable operating level. We can apply for project grants anytime, but they're, like I said, they're matching grants, so we have to come up with half the expenses ourselves, and they're not terribly generous. So, yeah. As far as we could see, this was our best option.
Thank you.
It also makes the gallery accessible to a lot more artists.
Thank you. I have Councillor Woodward has a question.
I just wanted to know what level of urgency there is on this, whether there's a timeline in which you'd like a decision one way or the other, and how the subsequent years might work in that regard.
Well, if we could get an annual contribution, it certainly helps our budgeting if it comes at a regular time. We're okay right now because we got that money from Metro Vancouver, but that was actually supposed to fund January to June next year. So we're always operating on a shoestring. And
Let me help a little bit. So, if we have a grant program that's annual, and we do that and review that in the springtime,
yes,
could this defer to the spring, or would it be something that you would consider more urgent for the gallery to have a chance to proceed to self-sufficiency? So, for example, if you don't receive a yes or a no until the spring, does that threaten your plan?
It's hard to say. Yes, I think it does. Yes, I think it does. We're having a fundraiser in November. That's always kind of a scary thing to see how much we bring in, but we're always on the edge. Yeah.
Thank you. No further questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. So I'll move on to F1 neighborhood traffic calming update. Everyone has had the report and has had a chance to read it. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Davis, seconder. Councillor Kunst, discussion. Councillor Richter.
Yes. September 5th, item number 19, was a letter from Linda Nash requesting that we put traffic calming in front of the 216th Street schools. So I'm wondering if those schools can be added to the list on page 2.
Mr. I think 216 is a major collector. I don't know if we put traffic calming on a road like that.
There's two classifications that poses a challenge to arterials and collectors, Your Worship. I think that might be the challenge. It's probably best to deal with that through a separate program. What this program is doing is removing the public consultation process from those schools that are fronting local roads, at least, such that they can be done simply upon council's determination. And then it adds, in addition to that, playgrounds, because that seems to be areas of concern.
Thank you. Councillor Woodward.
Just want to confirm we moved both of them. So does that correct,
Yep.
Mr. Mayor? Yeah,
Both moved.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I want to thank staff, Ken, for adding that interpretation to also include playground zones, which, of course, if I thought of that terminology separately, would have been included originally. So I appreciate that very much, and getting that added to the policy, making that very clear. Assuming this is going to go ahead, rather than leave it till later while I remember, wanted to get an itemized cost breakdown for the 5 locations that were completed this year and get that as part of the budget process, so we can start to understand more about what each location costs. And see what we did get for that $200,000 this year on that 5 locations. And also, if I could, given that we're proceeding with playgrounds and schools now under a sort of a different process, that I could get an updated list in a separate memo, an updated list of the current locations and their current ranking, and I'll compare that to the locations that have been submitted to me by the public, and then I can get that over to staff as a response to that memo. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Arneson.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I just had a thought. I was involved last year, and once again at the Topham School. They have a safe school travel safety program that they do with the multi-stakeholders. And so I'm wondering the degree to which we might be able to consider any input that group would put forward. I know it's fairly straightforward given the policy that we likely will adopt tonight, but just to have a process through which we can ensure that if they have any very specific or tailored information for our benefit, that we could include that.
Okay, thank you. So no further discussion. I'm going to call the question on F1. Carries unanimously. Move on to F2, appointment of external auditor for the township. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Long moves. Councillor Davis seconds. Discussion. Seeing none, I'm going to call the question on F2. Carries unanimously. Move on to F3, assessment, averaging, and phasing options. And this is a motion to receive the option. Councillor Ferguson moves. Seconder. Councillor Kunst. Discussion on receipt. Seeing none, I'll call the question on F3. Carries unanimously. Move on to F4. This is financial report update. This is to June 30th, 2019. This is again a motion to receive. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Whitmarsh, seconder. Seconder. Councillor Davis. Thank you. Councillor Richter, discussion.
I just had some questions about the numbers, particularly under the expenses, where we may have only to this point generated less than 50% of the actual expenses, but we have another 6 months left. Does this mean that we can anticipate substantial surpluses going forward?
Mr. Bracken or Mr. Clare?
Worship, not really. The challenge was this year the budget was a bit of a later process, so we're trying to play catch up on some of the programs and some of the capital items. So as a consequence, it's not a good indication. And if there were to be programs or initiatives that were underway, it'd be evident in the carry forwards, so not in the surplus items. Surplus is really destined for those situations where we come in under budget and the program or the item has actually been completed, and that's what we rely on usually in terms of discussing the term surplus.
Okay, and for example, on page 13, schedule of capital expenditures, all funds, there's 63.476 million, but we've only spent 389,000, and we're halfway through the year, so I guess that means we're going to have lots of carry forwards, isn't it?
Could mean carry forwards. Generally what we see is procurement takes some period of time, 2 to 3 months, and then the program can begin, and then it depends upon the scope of the program. As well, sometimes we're dependent upon other agencies. For example, the 216th Street interchange, we have benchmarks where we advance our funds, and if they haven't met those benchmarks, such as opening, then they're delayed. So that's a good example of the carry forward. So it's an ongoing challenge, and one of the reasons why we hope to start the budget process a bit earlier this year.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Davis?
Sorry, a couple questions on page 22. Fort Langley Outdoor Pool condition assessment, 35,000. It's 100%. Did we not do that in 2018? So because the pool doesn't make that money, and we're going to spend $35,000 to assess whether we want it or not?
I think what you're seeing in that circumstance is that the underlying regulations and status of the structure require it to be reassessed. So, for example, it may have been done a couple of years ago, but then we may have had to update some of the requirements to see how it fares. We do also know that that's a very challenging location because it's historically very important, but it's also one of the pieces of infrastructure that probably is very much in need of replacement, although the usage rates don't always justify it. So the assessment could also be looking at other alternatives.
Oh, okay. So it might not actually looking at the facility, because I think we only make 18 or 19,000 or something, and it costs us more to run it.
Right.
Okay, so that's the other quick question is, it just was answered, the carryovers, because how do we tell if there's carryovers on them? Because when we budget for something, we'll always maybe go a little bit higher. Where do we see that? Will that be in the budget? Will that come back in the budget material, or?
Correct. The budget actually references the carry forwards at a given time. Now, again, they're estimated. That's why the end of the year is so challenging, because we're trying to figure out how much we'll be doing to the year end and then trying to figure out what needs to be carried forward. For example, if council decided to authorize a field house tonight, we would tend to actually, and this was a budget session, we would tend to then to put the entire amount of that budget into the amount of the field house into the budget with a view to procuring and delivering that probably over a 1 to 2 year period. In so doing, that the fact that it would roll over to 2020 would be part of the carryover, and likewise if it rolled over to 2021 again it would be part of the carryover.
Okay, so my next question is 72nd, the rail crossing grade connection. We still have just about 400,000 and we have 25% remaining, but it's all done. We won't see that till.
So that's a good example where if all goes well, we'll be able to wrap up the project. The road is open, for example, on the rail crossing. The side buttresses are in place. There still may be some claims as to fencing or disruption that we have to finish off. Once those are done, we'll actually know what we can actually release to surplus.
Okay, and that would come. So one last question is this. We had on page 35, we had the tall timbers connection, that water connection, and nothing has been paid down. And did we not already hook it up? Or
there might be various parts of the tall timbers connection because there may have been actually a connection to our system, but there also may be a need to upgrade it because of the looping requirement. So we'd have to look into that in more detail.
Okay, because we had this issue last year of I would have thought it would have been already done. Okay, I think maybe because it's just an update, it's maybe we can deal with this when it comes further. Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call a question on F4, receipt. Carries unanimously. And the two pieces of correspondence for receipt, could I have a motion, please, to receive? Councillor Davis, second. Councillor Long, and discussion, Councillor Richter on the receipt.
Yes, on item G2, I'd like to amend the receipt to include a referral to staff for a report back to council on whether we can implement a bylaw that expressly prohibits bottling of groundwater in any of our zones.
I think we can get an answer from staff right now. I don't think we can. It's a provincial matter. Is that correct, Mr. Zweig?
Thank you, Your Worship. It is true that the legislation lies with the province as far as being able to impose restrictions, and we are currently working with the province to update that legislation to allow the prohibition of bottling. Back in 2009, our water management plan already had some language with this, which was supported by council at that time.
So we can't do a bylaw, we have to work with the provincial government, is that what I'm
Mr.
hearing?
Backen, maybe you can clarify.
That's effectively correct. We need their permission to enact a bylaw. They would usually prefer a regulation, but that should be coming back as we get into more details with them.
So it's ongoing. There is work coming, and it is coming. So exactly what Councillor Richter is asking for is actually being worked on now by staff, and we'll be getting a report.
The distinction being, rather than being in a bylaw, we were hoping that the province would pass a regulation as opposed to each municipality doing its own bylaw.
Okay. And how soon do you think we'll be seeing that?
You're asking about how fast the province moves on things, Your Worship, so it can be very quick or it can take a while.
Okay. So does that satisfy you?
Yep, that satisfies me.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Davis on the receipt?
Actually, I did. Okay. I just wanted the same thing. I wanted to see if they have a, like what maybe Kevin Larson, or well, we just learned.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry.
Councillor Long?
A lot of it will depend on the outcome of the UBCM resolution, I guess. I'm sure the province will be watching carefully there and see what happens.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, with that, I'll call a question on G1 and G2. Carries unanimously. And minutes of committees. There's the Mayor's Standing Committee, June 20th and July 18th, and the Council Priorities Committee, July 22nd. To receive, could I have a motion, please? Councillor Arneson, second by Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Richter?
Yeah, I'm querying the wording in this motion because it says council adopt the minutes from Council Priorities Committee, but we're still in the process of approving or reviewing the procedure bylaw. So I don't think we should have the word adopt in there. It should be receive.
Yeah, I believe for that particular meeting, although the meeting is ongoing, maybe Ms. Bauer, you can help. Is that the correct wording? Because the meeting has occurred, so we're adopting the minutes.
We're simply going to be adopting that section of the meeting. The meeting itself is not concluded. The challenge is that we will not be bringing that topic back to Council Priorities Committee probably until early in the new year. So there was a discussion, and we felt it was better that the motions that were passed then were adopted at this point.
Okay, and then that allow...
I think we should be doing the whole procedure bylaw together.
Okay, and maybe I could just query Ms. Bauer further that there were a lot of work has been done by this council up to this point, and because of the delay, there are some items in that procedural bylaw that I think Ms. Bauer would like to see adopted sooner rather than later, so it doesn't affect the work that needs to be carried on. There's other work, but to move forward with something. So, Mr. Back, maybe you could help clarify, because I think it's important that we adopt this today so we can get something that we can move forward.
Your Worship, we just have to be cautious because the function of the CPC is only to make recommendations to council. So any of the actual work that's been done can't be, I guess, adopted, if you will, in terms of the bylaw or the resolution adopted until it comes back to council for approval. We're instead talking about the minutes, the terminologies as to the minutes, because the CPC exists as a committee of council, a committee of council of the whole, really. The language is not to receive that, but to actually adopt the work of council's own work, not the underlying directions, but just the minutes themselves. So what we're really doing here is approving and adopting the minutes so that we can then get forward and bring forward those recommendations to a future council meeting such that they can be enacted or defeated.
Or dealt with, so.
Okay.
So hopefully that helps.
No,
clarify.
well, I'm still puzzled, because is the intent to start practicing these changes now before we've approved a procedural
We've always had the
bylaw?
language of adopting the committees of the whole or committees of council of the council, not of the actual subcommittees. We've always had that language. We can't start working upon, say, the procedural bylaw changes until the bylaw is amended or the bylaw is brought back for adoption. Adopting the minutes does not adopt the bylaw. That requires a separate direction and bylaw of council itself. All this does is validates the minutes for the work that was done.
Okay, so we're not going, for example, to start having third reading at public hearings? No. Okay.
No, that has to come back to council, and
correct.
Hopefully it'll come back. This is taking so long that we need to get some of these things in front of council, in my opinion. At least council has an opportunity as council to make a determination how they want to go with it. So Ms. Bauer, I believe, is working on something that'll come back to council with those recommendations that we've worked on up to date that the CPC has agreed on. Council still has to adopt that, and still has, so if we decide that we don't want to move forward with one aspect that we've approved or discussed in CPC, it can still be turned down at a council meeting. So
Okay, and the other thing I just wanted to point out is the July 18th minutes of the standing committee are missing the participants.
okay, that get missed. Okay, we'll fix that. Sorry for that. And Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on some of the conversation around the council procedure bylaw. Can I just ask why it's not coming back until the new year? Why wouldn't we just meet every Monday on it until it's resolved?
That's an issue of scheduling CPC, so
Okay.
It's really up to council's direction as to when they want to meet. Last time, I think we tried to schedule some additional meetings before the break, and we realized it was impractical till we came back. I suspect we'll probably have that discussion at our next CPC meeting of whether we can add some additional meetings.
We've got UBCM coming up. There's statutory holidays, and there's budget, and there's budget. There's a lot of things that have to happen. So I think it's, these are, done every term. It's not. I don't think there's a lot of stuff there's emergent.
I think the question really is what gaps do we have in the calendar, and there's a few gaps. But as you referenced, UBCM and the budget coming up will occupy some of those that are our traditional CPC slots. But we will have a CPC meeting in there at some point, maybe on a bit of a different topic that we can then again discuss the scheduling.
Yeah, I think we've sort of raised this casually before, that I could have come here at 12 today and we could have spent 2 hours on it. Why not just meet every CPC every Monday until this is resolved, rather than this dragging on for months and months because we never meet on it?
Well, we do meet on it. It's just we had summer break in between.
Rarely meet
and
on
we
it.
spent a lot of time on it already, and I think staff have a lot of other priorities that we need to deal with. And this is one way, I believe, to come back with an interim report and that we can move forward. So it's
just
nothing
one clarification, Your Worship. The intervening events will either be things that are statutorily required, budget, for example, or council's decision, UBCM, or it may be that there are other priorities that council has scheduled in the queue ahead. So these are not the staff priorities per se. This is a continuation of council's directions in terms of when these things should pop up.
Okay, with that, I'll call the question on H1. Yeah, just received. Carries. Councillor Woodward opposed, and we move on to other business. And we got your council clear the queue. Councillor Richter, you have a
Yes, I will move that first motion on developing a strategic borrowing plan.
A seconder. Councillor Arneson seconds. I have a question Be resolved, the strategic borrowing plan include a list of, okay, therefore be resolved. Staff to develop and bring forward. What I'm finding challenging with this is that we don't know what we need to borrow for. A future council or a couple of years now, items come up that require borrowing, and how do we plan for this now? Maybe the terminology should maybe be something like the foreseeable future, but Mr.
Well,
Backen, I'd like to ask
I'm
Mr.
very
Backen.
concerned, and we will be dealing with it in the open meeting this evening, but I'm concerned that we're contemplating and pre-approving $86 million of new debt for 1 year.
That's fine. Mr.
Is
Backen.
that pattern of practice going to be continuing? Because I don't find it sustainable or appropriate at
Fair
all.
enough. Fair enough. My concern is that this council cannot foresee the future. So by limiting, and we can't, what's the word you use on another, fetter a future council if they need to do a borrowing. So Mr. Backen can maybe clarify. The way it's written, I can't support this. Thanks.
So Your Worship, perhaps to interject somewhat, I think the challenge might be on the word plan, because that would, I think encompass all possible options. I think what maybe is intended is a framework, because we do have frameworks we utilize, and if we wanted to have a list of possible, not probable, but possible things the council could borrow for, we could put that together. We could also describe the framework by which we try to evaluate those as being necessary, emergent, emergency, infrastructure rehabilitation, whatever it may actually be. So that may be a piece of it as we try to go forward. The challenge I think you're alluding to is, well, what if we decided, and I'll pick 16th Avenue as the example, we wanted to upgrade that. We know it could be a $200 million bill. That's not something we're going to take on upon ourselves, but if all of a sudden other levels of government decided to provide maybe 75% of that financing, then there may be some urgency to try to do so. Those are things that we can't actually plan for, but we can build a framework for, because we can say that grants or submissions from other levels of government can make things a priority in terms of borrowing, as we've seen with some of the interchanges. So I think it's fundamentally taking us in the right direction. It doesn't affect those things that are before council right now, but it could be helpful going forward in terms of having a broader discussion, either at a priority session, at a CPC, at a full council meeting, as to how these things should be coming forward to council.
Councillor Davis?
Yes, this, strategic borrowing plan, this would lend to our strategic priorities chart. That would link with it, but I see that it could be cumbersome in a way that all of a sudden, it's like if I run my household and something comes up and I get spontaneous, and that could be cumbersome. It could be, that. So, but I just would wonder if it's some form, some sort of something that it would help us out, because sometimes we would at least then would have we could look at a plan and say, well, look where we're going. When you write it on a piece of paper and you start seeing how much money, and we just keep going up, sometimes it can be cumbersome. It can bother me of sometimes how much we spend. But if we have a plan, the plan can be, it can work better. I just like today, we have it on tonight. We're going to be going through the. Sorry, I'm run out of things to say, but I think that there's nothing wrong with trying to have a focus on what you're doing. But the other thing is, that's why I say it works well with the strategic priorities chart that we have. But sometimes things come out of the blue and sideblind you, and you have to react and be able to take advantage of certain things that come up.
Councillor Ferguson?
Oh, yes, I just wondered if the mover, Councillor Richter, would accept the friendly amendment word instead of plan, but framework. Sure. Could, Mr. Mayor, can we accept that as a friendly amendment instead of plan, framework?
Sure, by unanimous consent, unless someone objects to that as an amendment. I don't see any objections, so the word framework is in place of plan. Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Woodward?
Okay, plan versus framework. Okay. I think for me, it's hard to support it, declare support or not support at this point, not really knowing what the definition is of a strategic borrowing plan. I mean, it could be 3 pages to provide some information and some framework about here's what's been borrowed for what, and here's what we could borrow for more stuff. That could be 3 pages, or it could turn into some 45-page document that nobody ever reads. So I think if we can get some clarity on maybe what the intent is and what it is, and maybe that is referring this back to come back with some scope of what a strategic borrowing plan might be, what staff might find useful and what council might find useful, rather than just sort of throwing it out because it's not well defined. Because how do you define it? I think so. Maybe we could get some direction from staff in a follow-up and refer this back. So I'd consider that, but I won't do it if the mover doesn't like it. It's not my motion. So, but I think just trying to be helpful to find a way to support it, because I think on the surface it sounds like something that might be helpful.
Thank you. Councillor Richter.
Well, we know that there's a maximum amount of money that we are permitted by provincial legislation to borrow, okay? And we are fettering future councils when we keep adding to the monies that we borrow. So we put in borrowing last budget. We're going to be adding in $65 million worth of more borrowing. We'll be talking about that tonight. So I want to know, how close are we to the top, and what is the impact going to be on our ability to come up with borrowed funds should we actually have a legitimate emergency where we have to access borrowed funds. So that's part of what this is all about. I just, we have a ceiling. Where are we relative to that ceiling, and how can we manage our processes so we don't end up at that ceiling?
Just a point of clarification, Your Worship. The council has maintained for several years we'll call it the line of credit we pass every year. That is effectively, for those purposes, it's limited, I think, to $25 million. So we have that now. Is that sufficient? That's another question. But I wanted just to remind that part of any borrowing envelope has to reserve that $25 million at the very least.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Whitmarsh.
Lots have been said around it. I think this needs to maybe be just reworded or referred to staff just to come back with some thoughts around what's the best strategy forward. But I guess my thought around is also the statement here asks for a list of prioritized expenditures, and I'm not sure where that list of priorities comes from, whether that's a council priorities or if the mover's asking for staff to give their suggestion as to what would be priorities. But I think that also has to be considered. These are things that we're discussing as a council. It's really council that's deciding on these various expenditures and the borrowing. So it's really something that we should be formulating. What are the priorities of council, not necessarily staff.
Thank you. Councillor Arneson.
Yes, thank you, Worship. My thought about this and why I supported it in particular is I think it's really important to be transparent about our budgetary discussions. And one of the things that occurs to me, if it's helpful at all, is for Council, I think, to consider our upcoming budget workshops that we're going to be doing with Mr. McIntosh. So I think maybe with his expertise and some analysis by him, he might be able to come up with something based on his local government experience that would help us to define what a framework such as this would look like. And, maybe it would be a point of conversation that we could have at that time, or he could be alerted to the fact that we're considering this, and he might like to pre-consider this and give us some further thoughts about that. Because I do think it's a good idea. I think it would be helpful to be tweaked, and how to do that is based on a reference with somebody who has probably guided other local governments to consider similar propositions.
Thank you. Okay, so at this point, there's no further discussion, so the motion as amended, I'll call the question. And it carries with Councillor Whitmarsh, Councillor Coutts, Mayor Froese opposed, and Councillor Richter, you have I2. Here we go.
I will move the 5% tax penalties recommendation.
Okay, it's been moved by Councillor Richter, second by Councillor Long. And any discussion? I do some questions of staff regarding this. I know this motion is asking for, okay, where are we here? For the report, but it also asks for necessary bylaw changes. I think I'd prefer to see the report first. So, Mr. Backen, would the report come first prior to making, because I believe, I think it's a good idea, but I still want to know the impacts of it before I ask for bylaw changes. Mr. Backen, so what are we coming forward first?
Your Worship, the way it's worded, and we can defer to the mover, is that it looks like it's for a report and the bylaws to implement it immediately. I think you're suggesting that it be split, divided, or maybe simply amended to have that language removed, if that's where you're headed.
Yes, I believe there is some work been done, and to the mover, do you wish it to go forward with necessary bylaw changes? If you do, then we could divide it, but I would first like to see a report, so I'm just going to ask you how you would.
Well, we kind of got a report already, because Ms. Sinclair had done up a thing that I circulated, I think, or she circulated to all of council, which shows the different municipalities in the Lower Mainland that are using this system. So I see the two, like, I want this to be in place for 2020. And how long does it take us to get bylaw changes through in order to make it a reality for 2020? So,
just to have the report as part of the agenda so that it's transparent, so everybody sees it first. So I would then ask that we divide this for report, and then, really I have no problem with the bylaw changes, but I still would like to see the report.
But what
first,
additional information would you want in the report? We already got the report.
Well, I don't have it in front of me, so it's not attached to this agenda, and that's where I think it should be. It should be attached to the agenda to go with, so it's transparent for the public.
Worship, just to clarify, I think what we had is what other communities are doing, not what they're contemplating doing, or not what the merits of it actually are. There certainly are some merits, but there's some costs associated with it. And in our review of it, just to share, the other communities are asking in terms of what are the merits of going back to the 10% system. So that may be something that would be of interest to council.
There's more to it. There's a costing and what's going to cost.
Okay, if that's the case, then bring forward a report, and after we get the report, we can direct them to do bylaw changes if necessary. But the report should focus on, I think, the 5% penalties model being effective for the 2020 tax year.
Yeah, I agree with that. So if that's okay by council, we'll consider that an amendment by unanimous consent. And so, Councillor Long?
Well, that was going to be my point, actually. I mean, I'm very much in favor of looking at it and getting the report to ticket.
Thank you. Councillor Woodward? Okay. So I'm going to call the question on the motion as amended. Carries unanimously. And move on to I3, Councillor Ferguson.
Oh, yes, I know it's getting late. I'll just move the motion, if I may.
Okay, it's moved. Is there a seconder? Councillor Long seconds. Discussion. Maybe Councillor Ferguson can
I just wanted to say that, I think we're not ready at this point in time. I know it's in the major road networks for both Langley and Surrey, but I think we're not ready at this point in time. I have talked to staff, and there isn't any provision right now in budgets to go ahead with improving the road from 24th Avenue to 200th Street. So at this point in time, we just basically request to keep it closed and work with the City of Surrey accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you. Guys, get some comments from staff, Mr. Backen, regarding this and how it will affect Township Langley.
Your Worship, the City of Surrey has actually built a very nice two-lane road to the border with curbs and with sidewalks. On our side, we have more of a rural road that is perhaps paved in sections, but also may go back to some of the old chip sealing days. So it's not quite designed to the same stature. In the ordinary course, we'd probably look at trying to have development pay for that as Brookswood develops. If, however, there's a demand to actually have the road open more quickly, we'd have to look at some sort of funding and consider whether it is part of the DCC program or whether we could add it to the DCC program to try to expedite its connectivity to 200th. The good news is the bridge that's midway through the road and the half mile is in very good condition. Mr. Zweig assures me he personally looks at it at least once a year. That's where we found him several times. And it's in good shape, but the road itself is a more traditional Langley road.
Thank you. Councillor Whitmarsh?
Yeah, I'm interested, I guess, on that. I mean, the motion is to determine the road sufficiently upgraded to handle new traffic volumes. I'm thinking that that's probably would happen anyways. I'm certain that we wouldn't just open the road without actually looking to see if it could handle it. But I'm wondering, just at some point in time, it would be helpful to probably have some kind of understanding of what it would cost to to open that section. That road opening provides the greatest benefit to the Township of Langley. Most of the people using it will be using it from Township of Langley to head down towards the Vancouver Airport, to get onto Highway 99. It also provides other access out of Langley instead of backing up on 32nd Avenue or 16th, which are the only two ways to head west from the Brookswood area. So it seems to me that there's some significant benefit to us. I recognize there's a cost, and I recognize the road may not be ready at the time, but it is something that I think would be there for us to consider. And now that Surrey has done has added that nice road, and I've seen it many times it's my jogging route, so I'm ready to look into what that might be, because the benefit really is for the Township of Langley, much less so for the City of Surrey, in fact. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Long.
I second it, Your Worship. I think we should have a report on this. I mean, there's a lot of discussion in the community about it. Surrey's going to proceed on their plans. What is the condition of the road? I know there's some assumptions in this motion already, so I would like to refer this for a report and an update on what our plans are.
Okay, so it's moved down by Councillor Long to refer for a report, second by Councillor Richter. We'll just...
Meantime, don't open it.
There was a speaker's list. I'm just looking at the interest of time. We're going to refer this to get more information. And if anybody wants to speak to referral and get their comments in now, I'll certainly take it. Councillor Ferguson on the referral.
Yeah, well, I'm obviously not going to support. I mean, the thing is, some of us, when we put together motions, we try to do put some thought into it. I guess the thought would be, I've talked to the chairman of the school district. There's at least four manufactured home parks in the area. Folks do walk. I don't see it as there's no exit off the highway to get there I don't think it's any benefit to get to the airport. I just can't see. I would like to see this road open through the development process rather than anything else. I mean, all the report's going to say from the staff is that it's on our books. Surrey has got 4 lanes there. If those of you that ever want to go to Fern Ridge once a year or once every 3 or 4 years, go to Fern Ridge and take a look for yourself. I mean, it's certainly not the type of thing that you. I actually think that people have got the record, for those of you that go to Area 27 in the Okanagan, the record for, by the time they hit the Glenwood School, they probably have the record for the quarter mile for speed, I would think. I think of other areas in the township, but that has got to be by far the fastest road for people. I saw some guy shifting it at Red Line during the cruise-in, I think, with both motorcycles and cars. So I think we really got to keep it shut for the time being. We don't need any reports. We don't need any more extra staff time. But actually, I'm taking up dinner time talking about this, but I'm certainly not going to support any referral.
Thanks. Just to be clear, Mr. Backen, this road won't be opened while we're waiting for the report. Thank you. Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, no, I would have. Yeah, I would have preferred to have a chance to, the speakers list. But I mean, before we're just taking motions. I mean, I'd like to know in the future where we're going to take motions so I can, hit the button faster. I think for me, we can't even seem to agree on how many lanes Surrey is putting in. So I think maybe a report is helpful. I drove up there and had a look at it, and it looks pretty wide to me. So maybe there's turning lanes and maybe a beautiful boulevard or something that it's on. So again, council can't even know how many lanes it is. So I think a report. Normally, I probably would like to just skip reports to get more reports. But I think in this case, we don't even know how many lanes it is. So I'll support it.
Councillor Arneson.
Thank you, Your Worship. The gist, I think, of the situation is that South Campbell Heights is driving all of this, and we're on the other side of that. And so the City of Surrey, I wish we could just get some DCCs from them that would help us to build the roadway if we wanted it. I'm not saying we want it necessarily, but I think it's just driven by that process. And I think we had that dinner meeting that was postponed. Maybe this is a subject item that we should consider once we meet with the rest of our colleagues there.
No further discussion on the referral. I'll call the question. I3. Carries with Councillor Ferguson opposed. And is there any other business? Is there any other business? Motion terminate by Councillor. Oh, sorry. Councillor Richter,
Yep.
you had other business?
I was wondering, there has been, it appears that there's been a major spike in property and other types of crime, and I'm wondering if we could invite the superintendent in to do an update for council at the next meeting.
That'd be great.
People are very upset.
Mr. Backen, if you could, happened next door to me the other day. So there you
Yeah,
go.
so is it possible
Yes, Mr.
to
Backen
get
is
that?
nodded. Yeah,
Okay.
he'll have him come.
And the other thing is, there was an issue with Murrayville Water yesterday being dirty, and I really want to thank Mr. Zwag because he got right onto flushing the lines. But I'm just wondering if we have a status on that, what caused it, and if it has been cleared. There were over 25 homes affected, or well, 25 locations within Murrayville that were affected by it.
Mr. Zweig?
Thank you, Your Worship. Murrayville water is a blend of groundwater and Metro Vancouver water. The groundwater has manganese and iron inherently in it. When we treat it with chlorine to make sure the water is safe to drink, it precipitates out and starts discoloring the water. So the Murrayville system is a very finely tuned machine where we got to really monitor the chlorine levels. Over the weekend, there was a bit of a spike in the chlorine, which caused all of the discoloration. So the resolution is to do low flow flushing and keep flushing it out until the water is clear.
So do we know approximately when that will be?
Staff commenced yesterday, continuing today, and I'm sure I'll get an update later tonight to see what the plan is for this week.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Motion to terminate by Councillor Davis, second by Councillor Long. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.